Alright, what if I told you that one announcement, just one announcement out of Beijing this week could flip the entire global economy on its head? Because for the first time in history, China is no longer on the defensive side of this trade war with America. They have gone fully on the offensive side, and they are handing Africa the keys to the kingdom. Because that's pretty much what just happened. Because China dropped its rare earth bombshell, and you can already feel the tremors from Washington all the way to Lagos and Johannesburg. Look, on October 9th, China did something more than just tighten its grip on rare earth minerals. They turned them into a weapon. They added 5 more of these critical elements to their restricted list. That brings the total to 12 rare earths, the stuff that powers everything from the phone in your hands to an F-35 fighter jet, all under China's thumb. And what was President Trump's answer? He came out on October 10th and threatened another 100% tariffs on all the goods coming out from China into the United States. That threat alone sent global markets into a nosedive and turned this into the most dangerous trade fight we've ever seen. But here's the part of the story that everyone is missing. Because while Washington and Beijing are squaring off like two heavyweight boxers, Africa is quietly stepping into the ring, and it's not as a spectator, it's as the kingmaker. We are talking about a continent that's sitting on roughly 30% of the world's critical mineral reserves. These are the exact same materials both of these superpowers are desperate to get their hands on for their economies and their militaries. And African leaders are waking up. From Nigeria announcing a $400 million investment in a rare earth processing plant to Tanzania pushing forward with its big Ngwala project. They are done just digging rocks out of the ground for someone else to profit from. They are starting to demand processing facilities on their own soil. They want technology transfers. They want a real seat at the table. And honestly, for the first time in a long time, they've actually got the leverage to actually make this happen. Think about this. The Democratic Republic of Congo, it produces over 70% of the world's cobalt. South Africa, it controls 90% of the world's platinum. Namibia is getting ready to tap into a huge rare earth deposit that could change the whole green energy game. And as China and America go to war over trade, these African nations are realizing they don't have to pick a side. They can start writing their own rules right now. But here is the catch, and it's a big one. Is Africa going to use this moment to finally break that old circle of resource extraction and build its own future? Or is it going to get caught in the middle of a new Cold War, becoming a pawn in someone else's game, left with nothing but empty minds and broken promises? The answer to that question isn't just about Africa's future. It's about the entire balance of global power for the next century. And it's all happening right now. So in this episode, we are going to get right into it. How this trade war is opening up a once-in-a-generation chance for African nations to finally take control of their own resources. How guys like Captain Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso are already flipping the script on mining deals. And why this moment could be the one that either frees Africa from the resource curse or traps it in something even more worse. Let's get into it. So, what does it take to send the world's market into a nosedive in less than 24 hours? It turns out just one government announcement that nobody really saw coming. Alright, so picture this. October 9th, 2025, China's Ministry of Commerce drops what they call announcement number 61. It felt like a digital bomb. They added 5 more rare earth elements to their export control list. But that wasn't even the knockout punch. The real weapon was buried in the fine print. It basically said, if you are a company anywhere on earth and your product has even a tiny fraction, let's say 0.5% of Chinese rare earth inside it, you now need their permission to sell it. This wasn't just about controlling exports anymore. This was economic warfare. It's China's version of a rule America has used for years. All of a sudden, manufacturers in Japan, in Germany, they realized they needed a green light from the Chinese government to sell products they made in their own factories. Now, hours later on October 10th, President Donald Trump just erupted on Truth Social. He calls the move rather sinister and hostile and threatens to slam 100% tariff on everything from China starting from November 1st. And just like that, stock markets from New York to Tokyo went into a free fall. That threat had investors running for the exit as they started to understand what this really meant. But here's why this isn't just another trade war. This time, China holds most of the cards. According to the US Geological Survey, China controls about 69% of global rare earth mining, something like 90% of the processing, and over 90% of the magnet made from them. So when Beijing says they might cut you off, there just aren't many other places to go, or at least that's what everyone thought. Social media just blew up. Chinese state media were spinning it as a defensive move against the West. American defense experts were sounding the alarm about a supply chain nightmare. The message from China was loud and clear. But thousands of miles away, in the mines of Africa, something else was happening. A realization was dawning that could change the whole game forever. Now, China's power here isn't just about rocks and minerals. They've built this invisible empire that's right in your pocket, in your car, and even in the weapons that are supposed to defend your own country. Look at your phone right now. The bright colors on that screen, that's thanks to Europium. The speaker that lets you hear this, it uses neodymium magnet. The battery that keeps it all going, it depends on lithium and cobalt that probably passed through a Chinese processing plant. Every single thing you do on that phone depends on China's control over this stuff. And look, this didn't just happen by accident, because for more than 30 years, China played the long game. They systematically cornered this market with a strategy that was so quiet, most Western leaders didn't even see it coming. While America was shipping its factories overseas, China was importing the world's raw materials and building the plants to turn them into the building blocks of our entire modern world. The numbers really tell the story here. China processes about 90% of all rare earths. And when you talk about the powerful permanent magnet, the things that make electric motors, wind turbines, and missile guidance systems to work, they make over 90% of them. This isn't just being a market leader anymore. This is making the world dependent on you. Tesla's cars need huge amounts of rare earth processed in China. That F-35 fighter jet, it needs over 900 pounds of this stuff for its radar, its engine, its electronic warfare gear, even the wind turbines that are supposed to be powering Europe's green future. They rely on neodymium and dysprosium that comes from China. The Belt and Road Initiative, all those roads and ports, that was never just about infrastructure. It was about locking down the supply chains that make China essential. From copper mines in Zambia to all sorts of mining projects across Africa, Chinese companies bought up stakes, usually offering infrastructure deals that looked great to government that needed cash. But here's the one weak link in their entire strategy, the one fundamental vulnerability. They don't own the ground where many of these critical minerals are buried, and that ground is about to become the most valuable piece of real estate on the planet. So let me ask you a question. What if the one continent that everyone writes off as the poorest in the world was actually sitting on the world's greatest mineral treasure, and it was finally getting ready to stop giving it away? Africa holds around 30% of the world's critical mineral reserves. But for decades, the deal was simple. Dig it up, put it on a boat, and let someone else make the real money. Well, that era is coming to an end fast. Over here in Nigeria, the government is backing a $400 million rare earth processing plant, a project by a company called Hasetins Commodities Limited. Officials are saying it will be the biggest of its kind in Africa. The message couldn't be clearer. No more just shipping out raw materials, because in Tanzania, the Ngwala project is moving forward. They are planning to start construction in December and hope to be producing by late 2026, pulling out a lot of neodymium and other rare earth minerals. But the real shift isn't just in the project, is in the mindset. In mining towns all across the continent, from Kolwezi in the Congo to Mbeya in Tanzania, you are hearing a new kind of conversation. You've got young activists on social media hammering their government, telling them to stop being the world's quarry and start being the world's factory. The DRC, it produces something like 70% of all cobalt, which is basically essential for every EV battery. But the people that actually live in the DRC, they see almost none of that wealth. Namibia is sitting on major rare earth deposits. Zimbabwe has a ton of lithium, but has always just shipped it out raw. That's all starting to change. African governments are realizing they are holding a winning hand that they never really played before. Mali's government has already forced foreign mining companies back to the negotiating table to get a better deal. And in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré has gone even further. He has nationalized mines and is telling foreign companies they have to add value inside his country. The numbers show you the potential. If this new project come online, Africa could seriously eat into China's market share. That's a huge problem for Beijing, but it's a massive opportunity for Washington and, more importantly, for Africa itself. And as these African leaders started making demands that would have been laughed at just a year ago, both China and America realized they had a new problem on their hands, a continent that was no longer willing to be a pushover. History is rhyming here in Africa, but this time, the scramble isn't with guns, it's with briefcases and contracts, and the real price is buried deep underground. The competition for Africa's minerals is hotter than I've ever seen. You've got America's Development Finance Corporation pouring over $553 million into the Lobito corridor. That's a railway meant to get copper out of Zambia through Angola's port on the Atlantic. The strategy is obvious. Create a new route that doesn't depend on China. But China is not just watching from the sidelines. They've got their own project, the Tanzania-Zambia Railway, which is their answer to keep their influence over how these minerals get to the market. Right now, in offices in Washington and Shanghai, they are basically redrawing the map of global supply chains. The US has been signing agreements for critical minerals with Angola, Zambia, Botswana, and the DRC. In response, Chinese state-owned companies are going back to their old contracts, offering better terms to African governments just to lock in long-term supply, while cutting tech transfer deals with American firms. The most extreme example of this new confidence is the Alliance of Sahel States. We are talking about Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, led by guys like Captain Ibrahim Traoré. They formed their own confederation with one main goal: to rewrite the rules on how their resources are handled. They've kicked out French companies. They've forced Chinese companies to renegotiate, and they are now insisting that the minerals be processed locally. And information is flowing like never before. Miners in one country are using their phones to share updates on pay and working conditions with miners in another country. Environmental activists are working together across borders to show the true cost of these foreign mining operations. But as this bidding war got more and more intense, a new factor came into play, something neither Washington nor Beijing was really ready for, and it has the potential to change everything. So what happens when the pawns on the chessboard decide they are done being moved? They start playing their own game. The African Union came out with its green mineral strategy back in December 2024, and it's a total game changer. It states that instead of picking between China and America, African nations are going to forge their own path. They are talking about working together, integrating their economies, and developing their own technology. That $400 million processing plant in Nigeria is not just for Nigeria. The plan is to make it a hub for the entire West African region, to process minerals from neighboring countries, and to keep the profits and the jobs right here on the continent. Now, that's a direct challenge to the old model where every country was just competing against its neighbors for a foreign contract. The real revolution, though, is what's happening in the Sahel, because under leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, these countries are proving that you don't really have to be a superpower to have real power. Mali has nationalized mining assets, including the Yatela gold mine. Burkina Faso have nationalized some gold mines for about $80 million and is basically telling foreign companies you can have a minority stake, but you will transfer your technology to us. You are seeing a level of regional cooperation that was just unthinkable just 10 years ago. Yeah, I know that ECOWAS suspended these Sahel nations, but behind the scenes, mining officials from all over are sharing notes, figuring out how to get the best deals for their minerals. Countries in Southern Africa are working on a common strategy for their lithium and rare earth. And a lot of this is being driven by young people. University students are organizing seminars on mineral sovereignty. Young tech entrepreneurs are building platforms to connect African mining companies directly with each other, cutting out the foreign middlemen. For the first time in generations, China and America are being forced to compete on Africa's terms. Chinese companies that used to dictate every comma in a contract are now sitting across the table from confident African negotiators who know they have other options. American investors who thought they could walk in and get special treatment are finding out that these governments care more about jobs for their people and technology for their future than they do about picking a political side. But every revolution is risky, and Africa's push for control over its minerals was about to hit its first major test, a test that would either prove their strategy right or expose some very dangerous weaknesses. Now, here's the thing about power. If you don't have the wisdom to manage it, it can destroy you. And as Africa steps into this new power, it's facing all the old traps that have caught resource-rich nations before. The warning signs are everywhere if you know where to look. Just look at Venezuela, sitting on some of the world's biggest oil reserves, but its economy is a wreck and millions have fled the country. Nigeria knows this story all too well. Decades of oil money made a few people very rich while leaving millions in poverty. And the DRC is probably the toughest case of all. Incredible mineral wealth right alongside incredible poverty and conflict. As mining ramps up, so do the environmental risk. In Ghana, you've already got mining operations polluting local water sources. Satellite images show the scars on the land spreading across Africa's mineral belt. Accidents and spills at this site are a preview of what could go wrong on a much bigger scale. Then there is the human cost. Child labor is still a huge problem in some mining areas in the Congo and elsewhere. You have kids working in horrific conditions to dig up the minerals that go into our gadgets. In places like Nigeria, illegal mining is so widespread because families feel like they have no other way to survive. And as the big mines expand, communities get pushed out. Farmers lose their farmlands, herders lose their grazing areas, and the whole social fabric of these rural areas is getting torn apart by this push to industrialize, often without any replanning or conversation with the people who actually live there. Of course, there's corruption, and all of this new mineral money starts flowing in. The risk that it gets siphoned off by corrupt officials multiplies, especially if the right checks and balances aren't in place. And finally, there is the debt trap. To build these processing plants and railways, African governments need money. But whether those loans come from China or from Western investors, they come with strings attached. If they are not careful, they could end up trading one kind of dependency for another. So as the stakes got higher and higher, one big question started to hang over everything. Can a continent with all the resources in the world but not enough processing power actually pull this off? So in the end, real change doesn't just happen because someone from the outside pushes you. It happens when you realize the value of what you have and you decide you are going to get what you are worth. And the first signs are looking promising for Africa. Tanzania has already cut deals that force mining companies to invest in local processing. Nigeria's government has locked in commitment for tech transfer and local jobs. And the Alliance of Sahel States has shown that even smaller nations, when they stand together, can rewrite the rules. You are seeing progress in every level. You've got mining communities using WhatsApp groups and social media to organize for better pay. You have environmental groups using drones and data to hold companies accountable. You've got young entrepreneurs building businesses to keep more of the money from these minerals here at home. The fallout from this goes way beyond Africa. China's total control over rare earth processing is facing its first real threat as these African plants get closer to production. In America, planners are quietly trying to build new supply chains that don't run through China. And manufacturers in Europe are figuring out that a well-run mine in Africa can actually meet higher environmental and labor standards. The economics numbers are staggering. Projections show that Africa could grab a much bigger piece of the critical mineral pie by 2030, and we are talking hundreds of billions of dollars in new revenue. But more importantly, that money would come from higher value work, from processing and manufacturing, not just from selling raw minerals. That means real jobs and real technological growth. So when you zoom out, what you're seeing is a fundamental change in the world order. The post-Cold War era, run by just a couple of big powers, is ending. We are moving into a world where regional powers like the nations of Africa can set their own course. China's Belt and Road Initiative, which once looked unstoppable, is now being challenged by countries demanding better deals. And American foreign policy is having to learn that African nations are partners to be negotiated with, not just places to send aid. So for an ordinary person in Africa, this could change everything. It means the possibility of a good job, cleaner and safer communities, and a real say in their own future. So young Africans who used to see mining as just another form of exploitation are starting to see it as a way to build a better country. University graduates who would have left for London or New York are staying home to build careers in these new industries. The trade war that started over rare earth has become something much bigger. It's a complete rewriting of how the global economy works. And right at the center of it all is Africa, no longer willing to be the world's quarry, but demanding its rightful place as a global power. The question isn't if this will change the world, it's whether the world is ready for it. Now, if you have watched to this point, this is Frontline Africa, where we talk about geopolitics from Africa's own point of view, where we bring you the story with the kind of details mainstream media does everything to avoid. So go to the comment section and comment. What do you think about this renewed trade war between the US and China? And it has this whole rare earth in the middle of it. Donald Trump and America, they are not happy that China is in control of almost all the rare earth supply chains in the world, and they want to do something about it. And Africa cannot sit idly and watch them fight over something that also comes out from their own soil. So if you want to see more of my videos, kindly subscribe and turn off those notifications. I am your host, Ezekiel Enejeta, and I will see you in the next one. It's a bye-bye for now.